one of the most intriguing photographers of the 20th century, took her first known pictures here. Her photos weren't seen in her lifetime. Most she didn't even print, but saw just once in her viewfinder as she took them. It was 3,000 miles away in America that Vivian Maier spent her life. She worked as a nanny, and every day she took pictures, 150,000 of them. She was a poet of suburbia, a secret street photographer before the term was really invented. The shadows of the America of her time fall across Vivian Maier's photographs. Just before she died, 4 years ago, her life's work was discovered by accident in storage lockers in Chicago. It proved a treasure trove for the finders. People found it hard to believe that Mary Poppins with a camera could have taken these pictures. It's a classic parable of the artist, unsung in life. Van Gogh once said, "Stars are the souls of dead poets, but to become a star, you have to die."
I was the manager of a movie theater here in Chicago. I noticed her because she was kind of an odd bird, and she came probably 3 or 4 times a month for 13 years. And she was also the type of person I think you could potentially wonder if she was a little crazy. I did notice her camera, but with her vintage clothing, I just thought it was part of the costume. The rest of my staff at the theater thought she was mean. They would say, "Oh, I don't want to deal with her. Jim, can you go talk to her?" And I never saw her come with anybody, and I never saw her talk to anybody. After the films, she would be leaving at 11 or midnight. I would wonder where she would go. Didn't seem homeless, but she seemed close. She loved seeing a Buster Keaton film with children in the room. They would be laughing and the piano would be playing, and it was just a really magical moment.
Did you know she was a nanny?
No idea. To be honest with you, I was a little afraid to try to know too much about her. Now I sort of regret not prying a little bit and finding out about her life. It seems so interesting in retrospect. And I was just a little bit afraid to get deep with this woman, you know.
This is Inga Raymond, one of Vivian Maier's charges. Vivian took hundreds of photographs of Inga, almost all of which she's never seen before. Many were taken on this beach.
If Miss Maier was out here, she would wait until one of the kids was crawling right between that little ice cave hole. And that was where she would take a picture.
When the printer was printing this print, he didn't realize someone was hiding inside of the culvert.
Oh my God.
All of a sudden he saw this eyeball. Like,
it makes a very eerie look. But I know what it is. It's one of those large sewer pipes. I love that image because it is so dramatic. It's stark. It's film noir, almost. If you look at it closely, there is a cross right on the face, right on my face. But it's this almost caged animal look with a cross. It's very interesting. When she took her photos, she would be completely and utterly focused. I mean, it was just, an instant, absolute concentration. Then it would be done.
I think even if she was here, she couldn't explain her photography to us because she didn't like talking about her photography. And most of the people who knew her, and there are very few people who knew her, she never talked about her photography. So everything that we can learn about her is going to come from the pictures because they show us what she liked, what she disliked, what she was drawn to. We really are just left with the images.
Vivian Maier used to haunt this market with a movie camera as well as her stills camera.
Says I started to heaven, Lord, but I changed my mind.
Big sale in the bag, a big sale here.
Says I started to heaven, Lord, but I changed my mind.
Pedestal comes free with each one.
Says I'ma stay right here where I can have better time. Have mercy, Mr. Percy.
Stare, pry, listen, eavesdrop. Die knowing something. You're not here long.
It's a free sample, free. Here, you come in a little closer.
Say when you lose your money, partner, please don't lose your mind.
Needles, nails, hairpins.
Says I draw cold water from the poor boy's eye.
The flea market is a shadow of its former self, but still the happy hunting ground of pickers, treasure hunters. And pickers love old photos and postcards.
Oh, man. You get the trucker photos, I get the racing photos.
Vivian Maier's work was brought to light by people just like those she used to photograph.
What do you think? I just got it this morning.
Ron Slattery was the first to buy Vivian's work at auction in 2007.
The Chicago stuff's great.
postcards?
Yeah, these are old postcards.
Roger Gunderson was the auctioneer who sold it to him.
Oh, there you go. That's nice.
Here's Lake Street with the L, the overhead L.
Wow.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Damn.
Vivian Maier had no home of her own, so she kept her life's work in storage lockers. But in her old age, she was no longer able to pay the rent, so the contents of the lockers were sold.
What would she have paid to keep that stuff in storage over the years?
Thousands of dollars, I would imagine.
Isn't that sort of tragic in a way that she puts all her life's work into storage and she's paying out these huge sums of money for it, and then she loses it all?
And then it all goes away, yeah.
When her lockers were put up for sale, half a dozen dealers turned up. All they saw were old suitcases and boxes.
They'd open the door, you bid from the doorway, you'd look, you couldn't touch. What you see is what you get. And it was always a big gamble.
You might end up with something worth nothing, or you might end up with something worth millions, which, as it happens...
It happens.
Roger bought 5 lockers full of Vivian Maier's stuff. It filled 1.5 trucks, unloaded here in this auction room.
Had I known that this thing was going to get as big as it had, I would have saved every crumb of paper I had.
And these are the trucks that you put all Vivian's stuff in?
Yes, this one right here. But we threw some away. Personal writings and things like that. Some of that stuff that, hindsight being 20/20, had we known, we would have kept it. But we sold it, we turned it, we made money. You know.
The Vivian Maier phenomenon had begun. Now, New York galleries sell new prints, often made from negatives that Vivian never even developed, for upwards of $2,000. Vintage prints, made in Vivian's lifetime, go for $8,000.
It's complete accident that the world has stumbled on her work. It could very easily have been destroyed without anyone knowing about it. Vivian Maier, unlike any other photographer I can think of, made her work entirely for herself. She had no audience. She knew no other photographers. She didn't really print her work except in the most rudimentary form. She didn't exhibit her work or publish her work. It was a project entirely self-motivated, entirely self-fulfilling. And this creates a certain freedom, a certain independence. It's her own personal voice. Vivian Maier worked in a variety of genres. She took street photography, wandering around the streets of Chicago and New York, indigent people on the street because they're on the street, and just marvelously expressive moment. She does wonderful portraits that are of distinctive characters. She is able to capture in a moment. Everything is moving very, very fast. She would definitely be very close in order to capture the way his hair is stuck to his forehead and this anxious expression. She's very much like a poet who's trying to just observe very carefully for personal reasons to look at the world and locate what's important to her, what interests her, capture it in a photograph. It's exceedingly personal. There is humor in her work. This is a picture of one of the children that Vivian Maier took care of. She photographed while she was working, moonlighting on the job. Some of those remain in the realm of snapshots, but many of them transcend that genre and become more observations about children, about family, about the suburbs. Youth confronting age. Who's going to have the time and the space to be in somebody's backyard taking that kind of picture? A nanny would, who's also a great photographer. I mean, all her self-portraits intrigue me because, they're her and she intrigues me. She was interested in seeing how she fit into the world. We believe that she never fully realized her work, so we are helping her to realize it by printing it in a certain way, by editing it in a certain way, picking the pictures that have meaning to us. It is what it is. It's a very unique case.
Ron Slattery owns about 2,000 of Vivian's prints and negatives, which he is not selling.
Let's start with this one.
Would you tell us what you paid for them?
$250. And away we go.
For how many photographs?
My whole collection.
For the same sum, the auctioneer got all 5 lockers.
Did you make a lot of money out of it?
Somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000.
Do you wish on some days when you wake up in the morning that you'd actually kept it all?
Well, hindsight being 20/20, sure.
It's one of my favorites.
But when we first started selling this, nobody knew. Even the people buying, I don't think, knew.
Did you see the photos before you bought them?
Nah, I just kind of looked. I was like, oh, neato, photos, and bought them. At the time, I was buying so many photographs that I was putting them into boxes and putting them into storage, much the same way Vivian did. It's Vivian Maier, a very unique self-portrait.
Vivian never saw anything like the beautiful large prints that are being made today. When she saw prints at all, they were usually small ones like these, supplied by the drugstore or made by her in her lodgings. Ron's collection would be dwarfed by others.
There was a gentleman named Randy who bought some. One man, John Maloof, left an absentee bid on a box of negatives. Just a little bit of everybody. So that's kind of where her work kind of went, boop. When I went through some boxes in 2008, I pulled out the slides and went, wow, these are cool. Posted some on my website. John starts making prints from Vivian's negatives and selling them on eBay. Alan Sekula, who's an art professor in California, contacted John and said, this is very important. At this point was where he went, ding, okay. He started collecting as much of the work as he could.
So Vivian's pictures were starting to appear online, but who was making the selection? It worries some people.
I'll be the first to honor the quality of the work. But at the same time, I'm concerned because we're only seeing pictures that the people who bought the suitcases decided to edit. And what kind of editors are they? What would she have edited out of this work? And what would she have printed? How do any of us know who the real Vivian Maier is?
So you were telling the world about Vivian. Did you ever think to seek out Vivian yourself?
John and I both Googled up Vivian and were searching for. We could find no information. The first thing that popped up was her obituary after she passed away.
John Maloof now owns the lion's share of Vivian's work. He declined to take part in this film because he's making his own. The second biggest owner is now Jeff Goldstein, an artist and carpenter.
You've changed your entire life, Jeff. You've given up your vocation, and now you're just in the Vivian Maier business.
Right.
And you're not the only one. There's Ron, and of course, there's John Maloof. What does that make you feel?
Well, we spend half of our time trying to push our projects forward, and I think we spend the other half trying not to look like public assholes. We're under global scrutiny. Her house is right around the corner up here. And this is a pretty tough neighborhood to be in. There's a fair amount of drug activity, a fair amount of crime takes place. So this was her last residence here.
That's the door.
Yeah.
Did she photograph a lot around this area?
She did, along the stretch of Howard Street. There's a beautiful shot coming off the bridge, looking down, in fact, this way, the train tracks. She fell and hit her head actually right by those tracks.
Really?
And she was taken to a local hospital, resisted help, and they thought she would recover, but apparently that was not the case.
So during that period when the storage locker sales were happening, she was in hospital recovering from this accident?
That's my understanding. Yeah, I really came into this about a year later, which in some ways is nice for me.
How do you mean by that?
She went into arrears, her lockers came up. I'm thankful to be one step removed from all of that.
Jeff bought the bulk of his collection from Randy Prow, who'd bought it at Rogers Auctions.
When these transactions take place, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not a standard art acquisition. People are on their guard.
How did you get hold of these pictures?
I initially went down to where Randy Prow lives in southern Indiana. It's a good eight-hour drive from Chicago. And I brought along someone with me, a retired fireman, Chicago fireman, pretty burly, good-sized guy. And I met up with Randy, who had met before, in an abandoned warehouse in a rundown section in this town. Randy had somebody with him for backup, so we both came into this being pretty leery of one another. Randy's guy was much bigger than my guy.
You carried the money with you?
Yeah. It looked like I had a vest with bricks attached to it. So like the type they wear in the Army for protection, I guess.
Later, Randy was ready to sell even more of Vivian's work.
More and more people were hearing about it. So the last purchase price was astronomical. It was something I couldn't handle alone. And so John Maloof and I got it together to make the last purchase of Randy Prow. I went down with John and his friend Tony. I had my friend Rick, who was an off-duty Chicago cop. Rick comes armed, and Randy brought his brother, who came armed. There was a great deal of intensity in that room, because you just don't know what may or may not happen. I was sweating some bullets in there. No pun intended.